Kia ora koutou. I'm aware it's nearly 4 o'clock and this session's meant to finish at 4:15 and I'm going for it. So, got a lovely email from Jenny saying, would you come back? You were so successful last year, would you come back this year and talk about your project 1 year on? And there was a sucking sound when I opened the email because I pointed out that we were so successful because we filled in for Peter Waterhouse, who was so ill, who was delayed flying up from Hamilton, and who was so ill that his presentation was sort of muffled through a cold, and an Australian accent with a cold and sniffing is never good anyway, so no wonder they thought we were good, and then we get put in this slot, so fantastic. Anyway, 1 year on. I had to say to Jenny that the project we presented last year, we presented at the end of the project, so all I'm trying to do this year is make links between what we did last year, the finish of the project, and talk about what we've done with ITO. So have any of you used these resources at all? Oh good, some people have, good. We do get requests from time to print them out in full colour and please send them to people, and we have to say, I'm sorry, you have to download them. So the purpose of the resource was to provide exemplars for ITOs, but it was really to set up trainees for success. Because one of the things that is often an unintentional outcome of systems is they actually act as systemic barriers to trainee success. And when we think back over systems we've had over the years I've been in literacy and numeracy, that's been the case. So one of the things we want to do within these resources was clearly identify the skills needed for work, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I know from personal experience that doesn't necessarily work. And so what we said to people was you have to choose what activities work for you in your workplace. We understood that workplace trainers who were using these materials could be what Phil alluded to this morning. They could be grumpy buggers, or they could have never done a train the trainer course, so they had sort of no pedagogical background to base it on, or if they had done a train the trainer course, they would have no experience in literacy and numeracy teaching, or the thing that Rachel said, they could have real or perceived views of their own literacy and numeracy skills, so they might think, I'm not very good at this, I don't want to do it. So I tried to address that in the trainer books by putting in activities that would start off by saying, ask trainees what they know. So rather than the telling approach, do this, do this, do this, it's very much so what do you know, so you can find out what people know and then build on that. So trying to link to a year later, looking at ITOs, there's two major drivers in an environment of mergers and changes and all the other things that you're having to do, completions and training success. So there's two major drivers and they've been mentioned today. So one of them is business as usual. So for us, and I know for so many of you here today because you've already spoken about it, it's about engaging every aspect of your system. So it's not just the trainees, but your workplace trainers, both your on-job trainers and also your vocational providers and off-job trainers. It's about engaging your employers, the ITO themselves, your ITO staff, and also engaging unions and assessors. How do you change mindsets? And I know a number of you have been doing this over the years, and maintain those mindsets that literacy and numeracy are important skills, and build on those things. So people have said a lot of things today about personal benefits for trainees, business benefits for companies. Stephen talked about the context-dependent, and Diana talked about the context-dependent nature of literacy and numeracy. So I suppose when I think about it, I would say that literacy and numeracy development can be, well it is, I know, time-consuming, it can be difficult. I think it needs to have clear rewards, and I don't mean the sort of incentives that Katrina was talking around. I know some well-paid men who wouldn't have thought that they were incentives either. It needs to be concrete, it needs to be supported by the sort of mentoring programs that you're talking about, and this ongoing nature of it, that it is something that you keep on doing it. It's not something that is going to be done quickly and over and done with, because Jill talked about the issue of the changing nature of the demand. So there will always be need for increasing literacy and numeracy. And it's how, as an ITO, you engage effectively with all those stakeholders in your system. And understand the system too, because some of your workplaces may be working on training just in time, so they may be doing it incrementally, and others will be focusing on a particular qualification, a more formal qualification, and want to do it in a different way. So the other thing that people have talked about this today is about achieving gain. Now, when I first Googled showing gain, it showed scales with the usual thing that I am faced with when I get on them and look down. It was like, oh yeah, gain, yay, fantastic. And I'm very aware, and I'm reminded, and I said this when I did a presentation at Literacy Aotearoa's hui last year, that Alvin Toffler talked about the illiterate, not a word we use in literacy, but anyway, he said it, of the 21st century will be those who can't learn, unlearn and relearn. And I think this whole thing about literacy and numeracy is a real catalyst for this. So we have to think about doing things not just the same, but differently, and thinking back and thinking, well, what could we add to what we've already done? And so one of the things I also said at Literacy Aotearoa's planning hui, and I said a word and I got the reaction that I expected, and I get this from our own tutors. I talk about teaching to the test. So if you want to get gain, you have to understand the assessment tool. You have to understand what's being assessed. You have to be able to, when you look at the questions, know what skill is being assessed and at what step. And everybody who's using the assessment tool can be trained to recognise that. That's one of the things we do with a range of both vocational tutors and ITO staff, is like, you should be able to look at that question and think, yes, I know that's assessing comprehension at step 4. And then you know if that person is not successful at that, then to talk about what Rachel was talking about, you know what you have to do in terms of, you might be looking at step 2 or step 3. What are the comprehension strategies you have to do?